Hello, everyone, and welcome to English as a Second Language in Plota and your host. And I'm really excited to have you here today. Yesterday I was walking through the park in my city and I noticed something interesting. There were so many people sitting on benches, just watching the trees and listening to the birds. It made me think, even though we live in busy cities, we still crave that connection with nature, don't we? This got me thinking about a question that many people ask themselves at some point in their lives. Is it better to live in the city or in the countryside? It's actually a really common topic that comes up in English conversations, and it's especially important if you're preparing for the IELTS speaking test. In fact, this exact question appears quite often in IELTS Speaking Part 3, where you need to discuss and compare different lifestyle choices. Today, we're going to explore this fascinating topic together. We'll look at both sides of the argument, talk about the advantages and disadvantages of city life versus country life, and I'll share some personal stories and examples that will help you think about this question in a deeper way. By the end of our conversation, you'll have plenty of ideas and vocabulary to discuss this topic confidently, whether you're taking the IELTS test or just having a casual conversation with friends. So let's start with a simple question. Where do you live right now? Are you in a busy city with tall buildings and traffic, or are you in a quieter place with more trees and open spaces? And more importantly, are you happy with your choice, or do you sometimes dream about living somewhere completely different? I want to tell you about my friend Sarah. She grew up in a small village in the countryside. Her childhood was filled with adventures, climbing trees, riding her bicycle down country roads, and helping her grandmother in the garden. The air was clean, the nights were quiet, and everyone in the village knew each other. It sounds perfect, doesn't it? But when Sarah turned 18, she felt something was missing. She looked around her village and realized that there weren't many opportunities for young people like her. If she wanted to go to university, she would have to travel to the nearest city, which was 2 hours away by bus. If she wanted to find a good job, she would have to leave her hometown. And if she wanted to experience different cultures, meet new people, or enjoy things like museums and theaters, well, those things simply didn't exist in her small village. So Sarah made a big decision. She moved to London to study at university. At first, it was incredibly exciting. There were so many things to do, so many places to explore, and so many people to meet. She could walk to museums, attend concerts, try food from different countries, and take the underground train to anywhere she wanted to go. This is what we call the urban lifestyle, life in the city, with all its excitement and opportunities. But after a few months, Sarah started to feel overwhelmed. The city was noisy, especially at night. The air wasn't as clean as back home. Everything was more expensive. Her rent, her food, even a simple cup of coffee. She missed the peace and quiet of the countryside. She missed knowing her neighbors and feeling like she belonged to a community. Sarah's story perfectly shows us the main challenge of this debate. Both city life and country life have their own unique advantages and disadvantages. There's no single right answer because different people have different needs, different personalities, and different priorities in life. Let's explore the city life first. One of the biggest advantages of living in an urban area is the sheer number of opportunities available. Cities are economic centers where most jobs are located. If you're looking for career advancement, cities offer much better prospects than rural areas. You can find jobs in technology, finance, healthcare, education, arts, and many other fields. Cities also have better educational institutions, universities, colleges, and specialized schools that can help you develop your skills and knowledge. Another major advantage is convenience. In cities, everything is usually within walking distance or a short trip by public transportation. You can go grocery shopping, visit a doctor, meet friends at a restaurant, and watch a movie all in the same day without needing a car. This convenience is something that many city dwellers really appreciate, especially when they're busy with work and other commitments. Cities are also cultural hubs. This means they're centers of art, music, literature, and different traditions. You can visit world-class museums, attend concerts and theater performances, try authentic cuisine from different countries, and experience festivals and events throughout the year. For people who love learning about different cultures and trying new experiences, cities provide endless possibilities. Let me also mention the diversity that cities offer. When you live in a city, you're surrounded by people from different backgrounds, different countries, and different walks of life. This exposure to diversity can be incredibly enriching. You learn to be more tolerant, more open-minded, and more understanding of different perspectives. This is especially valuable in our globalized world where cross-cultural communication is becoming increasingly important. However, city life also comes with significant challenges. One of the most obvious problems is the cost of living. Housing in cities is typically much more expensive than in rural areas. You might find yourself paying a large portion of your income just for a small apartment. Food, transportation, and entertainment are also more expensive in cities. This financial pressure can cause stress and affect your quality of life. Another major issue is overcrowding. Cities can feel overwhelming, especially during rush hour when everyone is trying to get to work or go home at the same time. Public transportation can be packed, streets can be congested with traffic, and popular places can be crowded with tourists and locals alike. This constant exposure to crowds can be exhausting for some people. The pace of life in cities is also much faster than in rural areas. Everything happens quickly. People walk fast, eat fast, and expect quick responses to their messages and requests. This fast-paced lifestyle can be exciting for some people, but it can also be stressful and exhausting for others. Many city dwellers report feeling burnt out from the constant pressure to keep up with the speed of urban life. Environmental issues are another concern. Cities tend to have more air pollution from cars, factories, and other sources. The noise pollution can also be significant. Traffic, construction, sirens, and general urban sounds can make it difficult to find quiet moments for relaxation and reflection. Many cities also have limited green spaces, which means less connection with nature. Now let's turn our attention to countryside living. One of the most obvious advantages of rural life is the connection with nature. When you live in the countryside, you're surrounded by natural beauty, forests, fields, rivers, and mountains. You can enjoy clean air, peaceful surroundings, and the changing seasons in a way that's much more noticeable than in cities. This connection with nature has been shown to have positive effects on mental health and overall well-being. The sense of community in rural areas is often much stronger than in cities. In small towns and villages, people tend to know their neighbors and look out for each other. There's a feeling of belonging and mutual support that can be very comforting. Local events like harvest festivals, community dinners, and seasonal celebrations bring people together and create lasting friendships. The cost of living in rural areas is typically much lower than in cities. Housing is more affordable, and you can often get much more space for your money. You might be able to afford a house with a garden or even some land where you can grow your own vegetables or keep animals. This financial freedom can reduce stress and allow you to focus on other aspects of life that bring you joy. The slower pace of life in the countryside can also be a significant advantage. There's less pressure to rush everywhere, less traffic to deal with, and more time to enjoy simple pleasures like watching the sunset, having long conversations with friends, or pursuing hobbies. This slower rhythm can lead to better work-life balance and improved mental health. However, rural living also has its challenges. The most significant one is often the lack of opportunities, especially for young people. Job options in rural areas are typically limited, and many require you to commute to nearby cities or towns. Career advancement can be more difficult because there are fewer companies and organizations in rural areas. Access to services can also be a problem. In remote rural areas, you might have to travel long distances to reach hospitals, schools, shopping centers, or entertainment venues. This can be particularly challenging if you don't have a car or if public transportation is limited. Emergency services might also take longer to reach you in case of urgent situations. The limited social opportunities in rural areas can be isolating for some people, especially young adults who want to meet new people and experience different lifestyles. Cultural activities like museums, theaters, and concerts are often unavailable or require long trips to cities. This can make rural life feel restrictive for people who value cultural experiences and social diversity. Technology and internet connectivity can also be issues in some rural areas. While this situation has improved significantly in recent years, some remote locations still have slow or unreliable internet connections, which can affect work education, and staying connected with friends and family. Now, let me share another story with you. My colleague Mark grew up in New York City. He loved the energy, the opportunities, and the excitement of city life. But when he got married and started thinking about having children, his priorities began to change. He and his wife started to dream about raising their family in a place where children could play safely outside, where they could have a garden, and where the schools had smaller class sizes and more personal attention for each student. So Mark and his family made the opposite choice from Sarah. They moved from the city to a small town in the countryside. Mark now works remotely from his home office, which gives him the flexibility to balance his career with family life. His children go to a local school where their teachers know them personally. They have a big backyard where they can play and explore nature. On weekends, the family goes hiking, visits local farms, and participates in community events. Mark's story shows us that the choice between city and country living often depends on your stage of life and your personal circumstances. Young people might prefer cities for the opportunities and excitement, while families might prefer rural areas for the safety and community feel. Older people might choose the countryside for peace and quiet, or they might prefer cities for better healthcare and cultural activities. It's also worth noting that the distinction between city and countryside is becoming less clear in many parts of the world. Suburban areas offer a compromise between urban and rural living. These areas typically have more space and greenery than city centers, but still provide access to urban amenities and job opportunities. Many people find that suburban living gives them the best of both worlds. Another interesting trend is the rise of remote work, which has been accelerated by recent global events. More and more people are able to work from anywhere with a good internet connection. This means that people can choose where to live based on lifestyle preferences rather than job location. Some people are taking advantage of this flexibility to move from expensive cities to more affordable rural areas without giving up their careers. There's also the concept of seasonal living that some people embrace. They might spend part of the year in the city for work and cultural activities, and part of the year in the countryside for relaxation and connection with nature. This approach allows people to experience both lifestyles without having to choose just one. When we think about this topic from a global perspective, we can see that urbanization is one of the major trends of our time. More and more people around the world are moving from rural areas to cities in search of better opportunities. This trend is particularly strong in developing countries where cities offer better access to education, healthcare, and employment. However, this rapid urbanization also creates challenges. Cities can become overcrowded, infrastructure can become strained, and the environment can suffer from pollution and overuse of resources. Some countries are trying to address these issues by developing smaller cities and towns, improving rural infrastructure, and creating incentives for people to stay in or return to rural areas. The choice between city and countryside living also has implications for the environment. Cities tend to have a higher carbon footprint per person due to energy consumption, transportation, and waste production. However, cities can also be more efficient in some ways because people live closer together and can share resources like public transportation and heating systems. Rural areas, on the other hand, often have a lower environmental impact per person, but they may require more energy for transportation and heating due to the distances involved and the types of housing. People in rural areas are also more likely to have direct contact with nature, which can make them more aware of environmental issues and more motivated to protect the environment. From a health perspective, both lifestyles have their advantages and disadvantages. City living can provide better access to healthcare services, specialists, and emergency care. Cities also often have more fitness facilities, sports clubs, and recreational activities. However, city life can also be more stressful, with higher levels of air and noise pollution and less access to green spaces for exercise and relaxation. Rural living can offer cleaner air, more opportunities for outdoor activities, and a less stressful environment. However, access to healthcare can be limited, and there might be fewer options for fitness facilities and organized sports activities. The key is finding the right balance for your individual health needs and preferences. Let me ask you to think about your own situation for a moment. What factors are most important to you when choosing where to live? Is it career opportunities, family considerations, costs of living? access to nature, cultural activities, or something else entirely. Understanding your own priorities is the first step in making the right choice for yourself. It's also important to remember that your preferences might change over time. What's right for you now might not be right for you in 5 or 10 years. That's perfectly normal, and it's okay to change your mind and try something different. Many people move several times during their lives, experiencing different types of communities and lifestyles. If you're currently preparing for the IELTS speaking test, this topic is particularly relevant because it's a common subject that appears in part 3 of the speaking test. You might be asked questions like, do you think more people will live in cities in the future? Or what are the advantages and disadvantages of living in a big city? Or how do you think rural areas will change in the coming years? To answer these questions effectively, you need to be able to discuss both sides of the argument, give specific examples, and express your own opinions clearly. You should also be prepared to talk about trends, make predictions about the future, and discuss the implications of different choices. Some useful phrases for discussing this topic include expressions like on the one hand and on the other hand to show contrasts, in my opinion, or I believe that to express your views, and for instance or for example to give specific examples. You should also be comfortable using comparative language like more expensive than, less crowded than, or as convenient as. Another important aspect of preparing for IELTS is being able to discuss abstract concepts and make connections between different ideas. For example, you might need to talk about how urbanization affects the environment, how technology is changing the way we think about location, or how economic factors influence people's choices about where to live. As we come to the end of our conversation today, I want to leave you with this thought. There's no universally right answer to the question of whether it's better to live in the city or the countryside. The best choice depends on your personal circumstances, your values, your stage of life, and your individual preferences. Some people thrive in the energy and opportunities of city life, while others find peace and fulfillment in the quieter rhythms of rural living. Some people need the cultural diversity and career prospects that cities offer, while others prioritize community connections and closeness to nature that rural areas provide. The important thing is to be honest with yourself about what you need and want in life, and to make choices that align with your values and goals. And remember, these choices don't have to be permanent. You can always change your mind and try something different if your circumstances or preferences change. Let me ask you a few questions to help you think about what we've discussed today. First, when you think about your ideal living situation, what factors are most important to you? Is it having job opportunities nearby, being close to family, having access to nature, or something else? Second, do you think your preferences about city versus countryside living have changed as you've gotten older? What experiences or life events have influenced your thinking about where you want to live? Third, if you could live anywhere in the world, would you choose a big city, a small town, or somewhere in the countryside? What specific features would you want in your ideal location? Fourth, how do you think technology and remote work are changing the way people think about where to live? Do you think these changes are positive or negative? And finally, what advice would you give to someone who is trying to decide between city and countryside living? What questions should they ask themselves before making this important decision? I hope our conversation today has given you some new ideas to think about and some useful vocabulary for discussing this topic. Remember, the key to speaking confidently about any topic is to have your own opinions and to be able to support them with reasons and examples. Whether you're preparing for IELTS or simply working on improving your English conversation skills, practicing with topics like this one will help you become more fluent and confident. Try to have discussions about these topics with friends or language partners, and don't be afraid to express your own views and experiences. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed exploring this topic with you, and I hope you found it helpful and interesting. Next week, we're going to talk about another important IELTS topic. Should people follow traditional customs or embrace modern ways of living? It's going to be another fascinating discussion about culture, change, and personal choice. Until then, keep practicing your English, keep thinking about these important life questions, and remember that every conversation is an opportunity to learn something new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.